The air in a courtroom is a special kind of cold. It doesn't just chill your skin, it seeps into your bones, carrying the weight of broken promises and shattered futures. For Olivia Reed, 8 months pregnant and utterly alone. That cold was a physical thing. A block of ice pressing against her chest. Across the aisle, her husband, Nathaniel, a man who once promised her the world, sat with his arm draped casually around the shoulder of his mistress. And the mistress, Sophia, was laughing. It wasn't a nervous titter. It was a bright, cruel sound that echoed in the cavernous room, a sound that said, "I've won." But the heavy oak doors of the courtroom were about to swing open, and a woman in a steel-grey suit would walk in, changing the sound of that laughter into a choked gasp of disbelief. The end of Olivia and Nathaniel Reed's marriage didn't come with a bang, but with the quiet, insistent buzz of a second phone. It was a sleek black burner phone, hidden deep within a box of old tax records in the back of Nathaniel's home office closet. Olivia had been looking for a document for their mortgage refinance, a mundane task for a life she believed was beautifully, perfectly mundane. They had it all, or so the world saw. The sprawling, modern home in the Seattle suburbs with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Washington. Nathaniel's booming success with his logistics software company, Viridian Dynamics, and the most precious project of all, the baby boy, growing steadily beneath her heart. Their life was a carefully curated masterpiece. Dinners with influential people, charity galas where their donations were announced to polite applause, and weekends spent sailing on the Puget Sound. Nathaniel was charming, ambitious, and devastatingly handsome. He was the man who could command a boardroom with a soft-spoken word, and who until recently had looked at Olivia as if she were the sole source of light in his world. He would trace the swell of her belly at night, whispering names for their son, plans for his future, promises of a love that would last an eternity. The buzzing of that phone was a discordant note in their symphony. Curiosity, a prickling, unwelcome sensation, compelled her to answer. A woman's voice, husky and impatient, was on the other end. "Nate, darling, are you still stuck in that meeting? I've got the champagne on ice at the Fairmont. Don't keep me waiting too long." The line went dead. Olivia stood frozen, the cold plastic of the phone slick in her palm. Nate. No one called him Nate, except for a select few from his college days, and the Fairmont was where he claimed to have a week-long conference. He was attending a conference she now knew was a lie. The name on the text chain that filled the screen was Sophia. The messages were a brutal graphic archive of a 2-year affair. Pictures of them in hotel rooms on tropical beaches she'd never been to, screenshots of bank transfers, and promises of a future that had no room for a wife and child. The worst part wasn't just the betrayal of the flesh, but the betrayal of their life. He complained to Sophia about Olivia's mood swings during the pregnancy. He mocked the way she'd fallen asleep on the couch after a long day. He called their unborn child the complication. When she confronted him holding the phone like a weapon, the charming facade didn't just crack, it disintegrated. His face, usually so open and warm, became a mask of cold fury. There was no apology, no remorse. "You went through my things." He'd spat, his voice low and dangerous. "After everything I've given you, given me." Olivia's voice trembled, a mixture of rage and heartbreak. "You've given me a life built on lies, Nathaniel. Who is she? Who is Sophia?" "Sophia Vance is a woman who understands me," he said, snatching the phone from her hand. "She understands what it takes to be with a man like me. She's not Sentimental. The way he said the word sentimental was like a curse, turning all the love and care she'd poured into their home, their life, their coming child, into a weakness. The next day, a courier delivered a thick manila envelope. Inside were divorce papers. Nathaniel wasn't just leaving her, he was trying to erase her. His petition claimed she was emotionally unstable, a spendthrift, and that their prenuptial agreement, a document his team of lawyers had drafted, and she'd signed in a haze of love and trust, left her with virtually nothing. He contested the ownership of their home, claiming it was purchased with premarital assets. He offered a paltry, insulting amount of child support, contingent on her signing an NDA. He was trying to leave his pregnant wife destitute and silent. Her first attempt at legal counsel was a disaster. A harried, overworked lawyer named Mr. Peterson flipped through her papers, his face grim. "Mr. Reed has Thornton, Davies and Finch representing him," he'd said, sighing. "They're sharks. The prenup is ironclad. He's hidden most of his new assets in a series of LLCs. Honestly, Mrs. Reed, your best bet is to take the settlement. Fighting this will drain you, and you'll likely end up with less." Despair was a physical weight pressing down on her, making it hard to breathe. She was 8 months pregnant, facing financial ruin, and the man she loved was a monster. She would sit in the half-finished nursery, rocking in the chair they'd picked out together, and weep until she had no tears left. The world had shrunk to the 4 walls of that room, a pastel blue prison of her own broken dreams. She was lost, and Nathaniel, along with his laughing mistress, was about to walk all over her. The days leading up to the preliminary hearing were a blur of sleepless nights and anxiety-filled days. Olivia felt like a ghost in her own home. The scent of Nathaniel's cologne lingered in the closet, a cruel reminder of the man she thought she knew. Every object from the coffee maker he'd gifted her to the paintings on the wall they'd chosen in a gallery in Paris was tainted. He had already moved out his belongings professionally packed and removed with chilling efficiency, leaving gaping holes on shelves and walls that mirrored the void in her life. Her lawyer, Mr. Peterson, called with updates that only deepened her dread. "They've filed a motion to have you vacate the house, Olivia," he said, his voice tired. "They're claiming it's a primary asset of Viridian Dynamics, listed as an executive residence. It's a stretch, but with their legal firepower they might get it." "But our son," Olivia whispered, one hand protectively on her stomach. "This is his home. I can't be homeless." "We'll fight it," Mr. Peterson said, though he sounded anything but confident. "Just be prepared for a tough day in court." Olivia's support system was small. Her parents had passed away years ago, and her closest friend, Jessica, lived across the country in New York. They spoke every night, Jessica's fiery indignation, a small comfort in the suffocating silence. "This is insane, Liv." Jessica fumed over the phone. "He can't do this. There has to be someone who can fight these people. Peterson sounds like he's already surrendered." "No one wants the case," Olivia admitted, her voice hoarse. "Nathaniel's firm has a reputation. They bury people in paperwork and legal fees. Everyone I've called says the prenup is too strong and the fight isn't worth it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Jessica's voice changed, dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Okay, this is a total long shot. I mean, it's basically a Hail Mary. But I heard a name from a colleague of mine at the Law Journal." "Who?" Olivia asked, desperate for any sliver of hope. "Her name is Eleanor Vance. They call her the Surgeon. She's a legend in complex litigation and forensic accounting. She doesn't just argue a case. She dissects it, finds the one tiny flaw, and rips the whole thing open. She once took down a pharmaceutical giant, because she found a single falsified signature on a 30-year-old patent document. Olivia felt a flicker of something, but it was quickly extinguished. She sounds expensive and impossible to get. She is, Jessica confirmed. She barely takes on new clients. Rumor is she only takes cases that personally interest her, cases where there's a deep, fundamental injustice. People say she's more of a crusader than a lawyer, but a crusader with the fangs of a viper, hon. But Liv, what do you have to lose? The name stuck with her. Eleanor Vance. It sounded powerful, solid. That night, fueled by a desperate surge of adrenaline, Olivia stayed up until 3 a.m. She couldn't afford a retainer. She couldn't even get a meeting, but she could write. She opened her laptop and began to type an email to the general address on Eleanor Vance's minimalist firm website. She didn't write like a client seeking legal services. She wrote like a woman whose world had been stolen. She poured out every detail, the second phone, the cruel texts, Nathaniel's cold dismissal, the meticulously planned financial evisceration. She wrote about the nursery, about the kicks of her unborn son, about the terror of facing single motherhood with nothing. She attached the divorce petition, the prenup, and a single photo of her and Nathaniel from a year ago, both of them beaming his hand, resting on her still flat stomach. The subject line was simple: he called our son the complication. She pressed send and felt a profound emptiness. It was a message in a bottle tossed into a vast, indifferent ocean. She didn't expect a reply. For 3 days there was nothing. Mr. Peterson called to confirm the time for the hearing. 9 a.m. sharp, courtroom 4B. Try to look composed, Olivia. Don't let them see they're getting to you. Composed. The word was a joke. She felt like a fragile piece of glass, already spider-webbed with 1,000 cracks about to be struck by a hammer. The night before the hearing, she packed a small bag for the hospital, just in case the stress-induced early labor. She laid out her only decent maternity dress, a simple navy blue one that felt woefully inadequate for a battle against titans. At 11:47 p.m., her phone buzzed with a new email. The sender was E. Vance. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The message was brutally short, devoid of any pleasantries. I've reviewed the documents. The prenup is a work of art. My office. Tomorrow. 7 a.m. Do not be late. Bring everything you have. Olivia read it 5 times. It wasn't an offer of help. It wasn't a promise of victory. It was a command. And for the first time in weeks, instead of fear, she felt a fragile, unfamiliar spark of hope ignite within the darkness. The King County Courthouse was a monument of grey stone and imposing columns designed to make the individual feel small and insignificant. On this Tuesday morning, it was succeeding brilliantly. Olivia, clutching a worn leather satchel containing every financial document she owned, felt her resolve crumbling with every step up the granite staircase. Her 7 a.m. meeting with Eleanor Vance had been as intimidating as the email. The office was a study in stark minimalism, concrete floors, glass walls, and a single formidable black desk. Eleanor Vance was older than Olivia had imagined, perhaps in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through her. Her silver hair was cut in a severe, elegant bob, and she wore a suit so perfectly tailored it looked like armor. She hadn't offered coffee or condolences. She'd simply taken Olivia's files and said, "Tell me everything. Omit nothing." For an hour, Olivia spoke, her voice gaining strength as Eleanor listened with unnerving stillness. The lawyer didn't take notes. She just watched her gaze intense, as if committing every word, every hesitation to memory. When Olivia finished, Eleanor stood up. Your husband is not just an adulterer, Mrs. Reed. She said, her voice a low, precise hum. He's a thief, but he's a careful one. We have a long fight ahead. Today we simply stop the bleeding. She glanced at her watch. It's 8:45. Let's go. As they walked towards courtroom 4B, Eleanor gave her one instruction. No matter what happens, no matter what they say or do, you look at me. Do not look at him. Do not look at her. Your focus is on me. Understood. Olivia nodded, her throat too tight for words. They were late. Intentionally so, Olivia realized. Mr. Peterson was already at their table, looking pale and sweating under the fluorescent lights. He scrambled to his feet when he saw them, his eyes wide with disbelief at the sight of Eleanor Vance. Across the aisle, Nathaniel was the picture of confidence. He wore a custom navy suit. His posture relaxed, his hand resting on the back of the chair beside him. In that chair sat Sophia Vance. She was younger than Olivia, with glossy black hair and a predatory smile. She was dressed in a vibrant red dress, a deliberate garish splash of color in the muted courtroom. She leaned over and whispered something in Nathaniel's ear, and they both chuckled. Then Sophia's eyes met Olivia's from across the room. She didn't look away. She held Olivia's gaze and smiled a slow, triumphant smirk. It was a smile of utter contempt. Judge Thompson, a weary man with a perpetually stern expression, called the court to order. Nathaniel's lawyer, a slick, silver-haired man named Arthur Davies, rose to his feet. Your Honor, we are here today on a simple matter. My client, Mr. Nathaniel Reed, has filed for divorce. We have also filed a motion for the temporary exclusive use and possession of the marital home, which is in fact an asset of Viridian Dynamics. Mrs. Reed has refused to vacate. As he spoke, Sophia leaned towards Nathaniel again, her red-painted lips close to his ear. A bright, cruel laugh escaped her. It wasn't loud, but in the tense silence of the courtroom, it cut through the air like a shard of glass. It was the sound of victory, of humiliation, of a woman who believed she held all the cards. Olivia flinched the sound of physical blow. Her eyes filled with tears and her gaze instinctively darted toward Nathaniel. But then she remembered the command. Look at me. She forced her head to turn her tear-filled eyes, meeting the cool, steady grey of Eleanor Vance's. Eleanor gave a barely perceptible nod, a silent command to hold fast. Mr. Davies, Judge Thompson said, his voice laced with annoyance at the interruption. Control your associates. Nathaniel whispered something to Sophia, who stifled another giggle with her hand, her eyes dancing with amusement. And then the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a decisive thud. Every head turned. Framed in the doorway stood Olivia Reed. The courtroom held its breath. Olivia, who they all thought was the weeping woman sitting beside the no-name lawyer, was walking in. Her steps were slow but steady, her navy dress hugging the full curve of her pregnant belly. Her face, though pale, was set with a new, unfamiliar determination. And beside her, matching her stride for stride, was Eleanor Vance. The room erupted in whispers. Mr. Peterson, still sitting at the table, looked utterly bewildered. Arthur Davies stopped mid-sentence, his mouth hanging slightly open. But the most profound reaction came from the other side of the aisle. Nathaniel's confident smirk vanished, replaced by a look of stark disbelief. His face went white. Sophia Vance froze her hand still near her mouth. Her laughing eyes were now wide with a dawning, sickening horror. She stared at the woman walking down the aisle. the woman whose reputation was the stuff of nightmares in the legal world. And she stared at the woman whose last name was the same as her own. Eleanor Vance walked to the plaintiff's table, placing a hand on Olivia's shoulder in a gesture of both support and possession. She then addressed the utterly baffled judge. "Your Honor." Her voice was calm, clear, and cut through the murmuring like a scalpel. "My apologies for the theatricality. My client, Mrs. Olivia Reed, and I are now present. Please strike the appearance of Mr. Peterson. I am Eleanor Vance, and I will be representing Mrs. Reed in this matter." She turned her head slowly, her gaze sweeping past Nathaniel and landing squarely on the woman in red. For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed Eleanor's face, a cold, hard glint of disdain. "And I see," she said, her voice dripping with ice, "that my little sister is keeping interesting company." Sophia Vance's face crumpled. The laughter was gone. In its place was pure, unadulterated fear. The game had just changed, and she was no longer a player. She was the target. The silence in Judge Thompson's courtroom was absolute. It was as if Eleanor Vance's words had sucked all the air from the room. Arthur Davies, Nathaniel's high-priced lawyer, looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his usual glib confidence completely deserting him. Nathaniel's face was a mask of chalky white, his eyes darting from the imperious woman standing before the bench to the terrified face of his mistress, Sophia. Sophia looked physically ill. The vibrant red of her dress now seemed garish and desperate. The family connection, a secret she had presumably kept from Nathaniel, was now laid bare in the most public and damaging way possible. Her own sister, the legendary legal mind she had likely bragged about in private, was now her enemy. Judge Thompson was the first to recover. He peered over his spectacles, his tired eyes now sharp and intensely focused on Eleanor. He knew the name. Everyone in the Seattle legal community knew the name. "Ms. Vance," he said, his tone shifting from bored impatience to grudging respect. "Welcome. This is an unexpected development." "Injustice is often unexpected, Your Honor," Eleanor replied smoothly, taking her place beside Olivia. She arranged a single slim file on the table before her. "Mr. Davies was making a motion regarding my client's home. I'd like to address it." "Of course," the judge said, leaning forward. "The claim that the property at 142 Shoreline Drive is an asset of Viridian Dynamics is a fascinating piece of fiction." Eleanor began, her voice even and methodical. "It is indeed owned by an LLC, Shoreline Holdings, to be precise. An LLC registered not to Viridian, but to a parent company, NR Ventures, which is of course wholly owned by Mr. Reed himself. A standard maneuver to shield personal assets. However," she paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "What my sister and Mr. Reed may not have been aware of is that when they used the Shoreline Holdings account to purchase a $70,000 diamond bracelet from Tiffany's for Miss Vance last Christmas, a gift which I'm sure was for client relations, they created a co-mingling of funds so egregious that it effectively pierces the corporate veil." Arthur Davies shot to his feet. "Objection. That's unsubstantiated. This is a preliminary hearing, not a discovery deposition." Eleanor didn't even look at him. She slid a piece of paper from her file and handed it to the bailiff. "It's entirely substantiated, Your Honor. This is a copy of the receipt and the bank transfer record. Obtained legally, I assure you." Judge Thompson examined the paper, his eyebrows climbing his forehead. He looked at Nathaniel, whose jaw was clenched so tight, a muscle ticked furiously in his cheek. "But that is a minor point," Eleanor continued, waving a dismissive hand. "The real issue with Mr. Davies's motion to have my pregnant client evicted is that it's an act of bad faith intended to intimidate and harass, an act that speaks to a pattern of behavior." She pulled out a second document. "This, Your Honor, is a sworn affidavit. It's from a Mr. Robert Miller, the former CFO of Viridian Dynamics. He was fired 2 months ago." Nathaniel flinched, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but Eleanor saw it. "Mr. Miller was fired, you see, because he refused to authorize the creation of a new offshore entity in the Cayman Islands, an entity Mr. Reed insisted was for international expansion, but which Mr. Miller believed was for the explicit purpose of hiding marital assets in anticipation of this very divorce. Interestingly, the person who insisted on Mr. Miller's termination and personally escorted him from the building was Mr. Reed's executive assistant, Ms. Sophia Vance. The second blow landed harder than the first. It connected the affair directly to corporate malfeasance and a conspiracy to commit fraud against Olivia. It was no longer just a messy divorce. It was potentially criminal. "Objection," Davies almost shouted, his voice cracking. "This is slander hearsay." "We have no knowledge of this affidavit." "You do now," Eleanor said coolly, passing a copy to him. His hands trembled slightly as he took it. "We are filing a temporary restraining order, Your Honor, to freeze all personal and corporate assets of both Mr. Reed and NR Ventures, pending a full forensic audit. We believe Mr. Reed has systematically defrauded my client for years, using his company as a personal piggy bank with the active participation of his mistress." The judge looked from the affidavit to Nathaniel, his expression now one of open disgust. Nathaniel Reed had walked into this courtroom a powerful man, expecting to crush his emotionally distraught wife. In the span of 10 minutes, Eleanor Vance had reframed him as a common thief and a conspirator with his lover as his accomplice. "Mr. Davies," Judge Thompson said, his voice dangerously low, "in light of this information, your motion to evict a heavily pregnant woman from her home is not only denied, it's offensive. I'm granting Ms. Vance's motion for a temporary asset freeze effective immediately. A hearing on the matter will be scheduled for 2 weeks from now. I suggest you get your client's affairs in order. And Mr. Reed," he added, his gaze like chips of ice, "I would strongly advise against any contact with your wife or any potential witnesses in this case." He banged the gavel, the sound echoing the finality of a coffin nail being hammered into place. Court was adjourned. Nathaniel sat frozen in his chair, his face ashen. Arthur Davies was frantically whispering to him, but he didn't seem to hear. His eyes were fixed on Olivia. For the first time, he wasn't looking at her with contempt or pity, but with something that looked terrifyingly like fear. Sophia was already on her feet, gathering her purse, her movements jerky and panicked. She didn't look at Nathaniel. She looked at her sister. Eleanor met her gaze with a look of pure, unadulterated ice. There was no family there, no shared history, only the cold promise of a reckoning. Sophia turned and practically fled the courtroom. Eleanor placed a gentle hand on Olivia's arm. "The first cut is the deepest," she murmured for Olivia's ears only. "Now they will bleed." Olivia looked down at her hands, which were steady for the first time in weeks. The cold dread that had been her constant companion was gone, replaced by the warmth of a fire just beginning to burn. The 2 weeks between the hearings were a whirlwind of legal activity. Eleanor Vance's office became Olivia's sanctuary and war room. The glass walls were soon covered in whiteboards, detailing complex webs of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and suspicious transactions. Eleanor and her team of forensic accountants, a group of sharp, relentless individuals who seemed to subsist entirely on caffeine and a thirst for justice, worked around the clock. They were not just lawyers. They were archaeologists digging through the fossil record of Nathaniel's greed. The asset freeze had sent Nathaniel and his company into a tailspin. With his accounts locked, he couldn't move. Money couldn't cover his tracks. He was trapped. The discovery process began, and Eleanor was merciless. The deposition of Nathaniel Reed was a masterclass in psychological demolition. It took place in a sterile conference room in Eleanor's firm. Nathaniel arrived with Arthur Davies, trying to project an aura of bored indignation, as if this were all a trivial annoyance. "Mr. Reed," Eleanor began, her voice deceptively mild, "let's talk about a property. Your company, Viridian Dynamics, leases in Aspen, Colorado. A ski chalet. Can you tell me its business purpose? It's for executive retreats and high-value client entertainment," Nathaniel answered smoothly, reciting a well-rehearsed line. "I see," Eleanor said, sliding a photograph across the table. It was an Instagram post from a private account. The account belonged to Sophia. The photo showed her and Nathaniel wrapped in ski gear, kissing in front of a roaring fire. The chalet was unmistakably the one in question. The caption read, "My king, treating me to a private getaway. Best life, love." The post was dated during a week Nathaniel had told Olivia he was at a tech symposium in Berlin. Nathaniel's composure cracked. "My personal life is not relevant to this case." "Your personal life became relevant when you started funding it with corporate assets that are 50% my client's marital property. Mr. Reed," Eleanor countered, her voice hardening. "This chalet, leased for $20,000 a month by Viridian, was used as your personal love nest. Shall we go through the catering receipts? The private ski instructor you hired for Miss Vance. The case of Dom Perignon, charged to the corporate account as office supplies. For 6 hours, she dismantled him, piece by piece. Every lie he had ever told, every dollar he had tried to hide, was brought into the harsh light of the deposition room. She presented flight manifests, showing him and Sophia flying first class to the Maldives on the company dime. She produced credit card statements detailing thousands of dollars spent at Cartier Chanel and Hermes, all for Sophia, all classified as business development expenses. Next was Sophia's deposition. She arrived trying to look like a victim, dressed in a conservative grey suit, her demeanor subdued. She attempted to paint herself as a naive young employee, swept up by a powerful, charismatic boss. "I loved him," she said, dabbing at a dry eye with a tissue. "I thought he was going to leave his wife. He told me their marriage was over long before I came along." Eleanor let her speak, her expression unreadable. When Sophia was finished with her soliloquy, Eleanor leaned forward. "Miss Vance," she said, the use of her own surname, a deliberate twist of the knife. "You and I grew up in the same house. I know for a fact you are many things, but naive is not one of them. Let's talk about your promotion to executive assistant." "I earned it," Sophia said quickly. "Did you?" Eleanor asked. "Or was it a condition of your silence after you discovered Mr. Reed was embezzling funds to cover a series of bad personal investments in 2023? "We have the emails, Sophia. The ones you sent from a burner account to his private email detailing the wire transfers and suggesting he promote you to a position where you could help manage the optics. You weren't his victim. You were his co-conspirator. It was blackmail, wasn't it?" Sophia's face drained of all color. She looked at her sister, the woman whose childhood She had made a misery with her selfishness and lies. She had stolen money from their parents. She had spread vicious rumors about Eleanor in college. This was not the first time her greed had led to a confrontation with her older sister, but it would be the last. I want a lawyer. Sophia stammered, her voice a pathetic whisper. You should have gotten one weeks ago, Eleanor said, leaning back in her chair. The district attorney's office will be very interested in those emails. The web wasn't just unraveling. It was tightening into a noose. They discovered that Nathaniel, with Sophia's help, had created a phantom employee on the Viridian payroll. The salary, a hefty 6 figures, was being direct deposited into an account in Sophia's name. They had siphoned close to $500,000 this way. During this time, Olivia found a strange, quiet strength. She spent her days at Eleanor's office not as a client, but as part of the team. Her pre-marriage career had been in architectural design, and her eye for detail was meticulous. She pored over blueprints for office buildings Nathaniel claimed as corporate assets, proving they were empty shells with no tenants designed solely to inflate the company's value. She found inconsistencies in expense reports that even the accountants had missed. She was no longer just a victim of Nathaniel's betrayal. She was an active architect of his downfall. One evening, as Olivia was organizing a mountain of evidence, Eleanor came and sat beside her. You have a good eye, the lawyer said. It was the closest she had ever come to a compliment. I just want this to be over. Olivia confessed, her hand resting on her belly. For him. I know, Eleanor said, her gaze softening for a moment. I took this case because of the letter you wrote. Because of the injustice, but also because of her. My sister has been a force of chaos her entire life, leaving wreckage in her wake. Our parents enabled her, cleaned up her messes. I cut her off years ago, but I see now that was a mistake. I just allowed her to find a bigger mess to make. This time the wreckage stops with her. You and your son deserve a clean slate. It was a glimpse behind the armor, a shared moment of understanding between two women, bound together by the destructive actions of others. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that they were going to win. The mountain of evidence compiled by Eleanor's team was more like an avalanche waiting to happen. The initial divorce proceeding had morphed into a full-blown criminal investigation. The district attorney's office, armed with the sworn affidavit from the ex-CFO, and the damning emails Eleanor had uncovered, had opened a formal case against Nathaniel Reed and Viridian Dynamics for corporate fraud and embezzlement. Nathaniel was cornered. His assets were frozen, his reputation was in tatters, and he was facing the very real possibility of a prison sentence. The arrogance and confidence he had displayed in that first court appearance were gone, replaced by the quiet, desperate panic of a trapped animal. His lawyer, Arthur Davies, seeing the overwhelming evidence, knew that a trial would be a slaughter. His only play was a deal. The meeting was arranged in a neutral conference room, halfway between the two law firms. Olivia was there, sitting silently beside Eleanor. She felt no fear, only a strange, detached calm. Across the table, Nathaniel looked gaunt, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame. He wouldn't meet Olivia's eyes. My client is prepared to offer a settlement, Davies began, his voice strained. A generous one. He slid a proposal across the table. Eleanor glanced at it for a fraction of a second before pushing it back. This is an insult. We're not here to negotiate percentages of stolen money, Arthur. We are here to discuss a complete and total capitulation. Now see here, Davies blustered. My client is a respected businessman. Your client is a common thief who is about to be indicted. Eleanor cut him off, her voice like Umstultil. He will give my client the house unencumbered. He will fund a trust for his son with $10 million. He will pay a lifetime of alimony commensurate with the lifestyle he established, and he will cover all legal fees. In return, Mrs. Reed will release all civil claims against him. The criminal charges, however, that is a matter for the DA. Nathaniel finally spoke, his voice raspy. 10 million. That's insane. It would ruin me. You ruined yourself, Nathaniel, Olivia said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was quiet but steady, carrying across the silent room. You did this. He finally looked at her, and in his eyes she saw a flicker of the man she once loved, now twisted by desperation. He saw no path out, and so, like all cowards, he looked for someone else to sacrifice. It wasn't all me, he said, his voice dropping. Sophia. She was the one who came up with the phantom employee idea. She managed the accounts. She pushed me to hide the assets. She was ambitious. She knew everything. Davies tried to silence him, but Nathaniel was on a roll, the words tumbling out in a frantic, self-serving cascade. She was the one who shredded the documents from the old CFO. I have proof. I have a recording. She was bragging about it. It was the ultimate betrayal. The man Sophia had hitched her future to the man she had helped defraud and humiliate his wife for, was now turning on her, completely offering her up to the lions to save his own skin. He was a fox caught in a trap, willing to chew off his own leg, or in this case his accomplices, to get free. Eleanor listened, her expression unreadable. She had anticipated this. She knew both their characters intimately. Nathaniel the narcissist would never take the fall alone, and Sophia the opportunist would be his easiest scapegoat. A recording, Eleanor prompted, her voice neutral. Yes, Nathaniel said eagerly, seeing a glimmer of hope. On my phone. She's talking to a friend, laughing about how she has me wrapped around her finger, how she's going to be set for life. She details the entire scheme. And there it was, the final pathetic act of a pathetic man. He would send his lover to prison to reduce his own sentence. 2 days later, based on the evidence provided by Nathaniel as part of his plea bargain, police officers arrived at Sophia Vance's luxury downtown apartment, an apartment paid for by Viridian Dynamics. She was arrested for conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. The images on the evening news were stark. The glamorous mistress no longer laughing, being led away in handcuffs, her face a mask of shock and terror. She looked small and alone, the vibrant red dress from the courtroom replaced by a rumpled tracksuit. The king she had bet on had sacrificed her without a second thought. Olivia watched the news report from the comfort of her own living room in the house she now knew she would keep. She felt no satisfaction, no triumphant glee. She just felt a profound sadness for the utter hollowness of the lives they had built. They had chased wealth and status, and in the end, they had devoured each other. She placed a hand on her belly, where her son gave a reassuring kick. Her future was not about revenge. It was about him. It was about building a new life, a real one, on the ashes of the old. The storm was finally passing. The final settlement was signed not in a courtroom, but in the quiet, sunlit conference room of Eleanor Vance's firm. The fight was over. Nathaniel, having thrown Sophia to the wolves, had agreed to every single one of Eleanor's terms. He had saved himself from a long prison sentence, but he was a broken man. He would serve 2 years in a minimum security facility for corporate fraud. His company would be dismantled by receivers, and his name would forever be synonymous with disgrace. Olivia signed the last page of the thick document, her hand steady. The house was hers. Her son's future was secure. She was free. As Nathaniel was escorted out by his lawyer, a stooped figure who was a pale imitation of the Titan who had walked into court months ago. He paused at the door and looked back at Olivia. "I did love you once, you know," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Olivia met his gaze not with hatred, but with a calm, clear-eyed pity. "The man I loved would never have done this, Nathaniel. That man has been gone for a very long time." He flinched, nodded once, and was gone. After the room had cleared, only Olivia and Eleanor remained. The late afternoon sun streamed through the glass walls, casting long shadows across the room. "It's done," Olivia said softly, the reality of it finally sinking in. "Yes, it is," Eleanor replied. She came over and stood by Olivia, looking out at the Seattle skyline. "Sophia took a plea deal. She'll serve 18 months. She testified against him, of course. A final fitting act of self-preservation." "Are you okay?" Olivia asked, sensing the complex emotions behind the lawyer's stoic facade. Eleanor was silent for a long moment. "My sister made her choices a long time ago," she said finally. "I have mourned the loss of her for years. What I did was not for me or even against her. It was for the principle of the matter. People like Nathaniel and Sophia believe the rules don't apply to them. They believe they can build their lives on the wreckage of others. It is important from time to time to show them that they are wrong, that foundations matter." She turned to Olivia, a rare small smile touching her lips. "You, Mrs. Reed, have an excellent foundation. You have integrity and a strength you didn't know you possessed. That is worth more than all the money he tried to hide." Eleanor slid a simple business card across the table. "My personal number. Should you or your son ever need anything at all." It was a gesture of profound respect, an acknowledgement of the bond that had been forged between them in the crucible of the past few months. 3 months later, Olivia brought her son Benjamin home from the hospital. She brought him home to the house she had fought for, to the nursery she had finished decorating herself. The room was filled with soft blues and yellows, and a mobile of handcrafted wooden stars hung over the crib. It was a space of peace and promise. Holding her sleeping son in her arms, she stood by the large window overlooking the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the vast open sky. The past year had been a tempest, a storm that had torn her life down to its studs. But now, standing here, she realized it had also cleared away all the lies, all the illusions. She was not the naive, trusting woman she had been. She was a survivor, a mother, a warrior who had faced down dragons and won. She had walked into that courtroom, a victim, pregnant and terrified, facing a future of ruin. She had walked out the architect of a new life, one built not on a man's promises, but on her own unshakable foundation of strength. As Ben stirred in her arms, making a soft, contented sound, Olivia smiled. The future was no longer a terrifying unknown. It was a blank page, and for the first time in a long time, she couldn't wait to write what came next. The victory Olivia discovered was not a finish line, but a new starting point. The quiet that settled over her life in the months after Ben's birth was a welcome reprieve, but it was also a space where the echoes of the past sometimes grew loud. Healing, she learned, was not a linear path. It was a dance between the profound, all-consuming love she felt for her son and the phantom limb of a life that had been violently amputated. There were nights during the 3 a.m. feedings when the house was so still she could hear her own heartbeat. She would sit in the rocking chair, Ben's warm, milk-scented body nestled against hers, and feel a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. This tiny, perfect human was her anchor, her true north. But then a car would backfire on the street outside, and for a split second her heart would seize with the memory of the courier's van of the papers that had shattered her world. The trauma had left hairline fractures on her soul, invisible to the eye, but still tender to the touch. She was slowly reclaiming the house. The home office, once Nathaniel's domain of power and deceit, had been the hardest part. For weeks she kept the door closed. One day, fueled by a surge of resolve, she'd opened it, the scent of his expensive leather chair and faint cologne still clinging to the air. She spent the next 2 days methodically dismantling it. She donated the furniture, tore out the heavy mahogany bookshelves, and had the room repainted in a soft, calming shade of cream. It sat empty for a month, a blank canvas, its ghosts exorcised. Her relationship with Eleanor Vance evolved in unexpected ways. The fierce lawyer, who had surgically dismantled her enemies, became a quiet, almost grandmotherly presence in her life. Eleanor sent a ridiculously lavish gift when Ben was born, a first-edition set of classic children's books, bound in blue leather. 2 months later she called. "I find myself with an unscheduled afternoon, Olivia," she'd said, her voice retaining its usual precision. "I'd like to see the dividend on our investment." Eleanor arrived not in a power suit, but in tailored grey slacks and a cashmere sweater, looking more like a university professor than a legal shark. She held Ben with a surprising gentle confidence, her sharp eyes softening as she looked at his sleeping face. "He has your resilience," Eleanor observed, handing him back to Olivia. "You can see it in his brow. He won't be easily trifled with." They sat in the living room, the one Olivia had fought to keep, and drank tea. Eleanor's gaze drifted towards the empty room down the hall. "The office?" she asked. "I cleared it out," Olivia said. "I'm not sure what to do with it yet." "What did you do before all this?" Eleanor asked, though Olivia knew she already had the answer. "I was an architect," Olivia replied, the words feeling foreign. "Residential design. I haven't picked up a pencil in almost 2 years. A foundation is a difficult thing to build," Eleanor said, her eyes meeting Olivia's. "It requires a clear vision of what you want the structure to withstand. You've just survived a Category 5 hurricane, Olivia. It's natural to be hesitant about drawing new blueprints, but you must. A life cannot be lived in an empty room." The conversation stayed with Olivia, turning over and over in her mind. That evening, after putting Ben to bed, she retrieved a portfolio from deep within her closet. She unzipped it, the smell of graphite and paper, a welcome nostalgia. Her old drawings were inside, filled with light and clean lines. For the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of her old self. The woman who existed before the titles of wife and victim had been forced upon her. A week later, a letter arrived. It was postmarked from a federal correctional institution. The handwriting was neat, familiar, and utterly chilling. It was from Nathaniel. Her first instinct was to burn it. Her second, born of a need for finality, was to read it. She waited until Ben was asleep, then sat at her kitchen island, the single sheet of paper trembling in her hand. It was not the letter of a remorseful man. It was a masterpiece of self-pity and subtle manipulation. He wrote of the loneliness of his cell, of the injustice of his sentence when so many others do worse. He wrote about Sophia, calling her a poison that had infected his judgment. He claimed to think of Olivia and his son every day. He ended by saying he hoped one day she could find it in her heart to forgive him not for him, but for her own peace. The words were designed to make her feel guilty, to position him as a fallen man worthy of her sympathy. A year ago it might have worked, but the woman reading the letter was not the same one he had married. She saw every calculated phrase, every attempt to shift blame. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry he got caught. She read it once, then a second time, feeling the last vestiges of his power over her turn to ash. He was an echo, a ghost story she would one day tell her son about the importance of character and integrity. She stood up, walked to the empty room, and tore the letter into tiny, insignificant pieces, letting them fall like snow onto the bare floor. Then she went back to her portfolio. She pulled out a fresh sheet of vellum, a ruler, and a pencil. As the moon cast a silvery glow across the floor, she began to sketch. She designed a large drafting table to sit where his desk once was. She drew floor-to-ceiling shelves for books on design and art, not law and finance. She drew a small playpen for Ben in the corner, bathed in the light from the window. She was drawing a room not just for her work, but for her life. A space where a mother could also be a creator, where a survivor could be a visionary. She was drawing her new foundation, and this time she was the sole architect. That's the incredible story of Olivia Reed, a woman who turned her deepest betrayal into her greatest victory. It's a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise. When faced with public humiliation and financial ruin, Olivia discovered a resilience she never knew she had, proving that integrity and courage are weapons that even the most powerful bullies can't defeat. Her journey from a heartbroken wife to a triumphant mother is a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. If Olivia's story of justice and empowerment resonated with you, please show your support by hitting that like button and sharing this video with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next real-life drama. What part of Olivia's story moved you the most? Let us know in the comments below.